And we're live.
Hello, and welcome to Soiree Lifestyle Series 2020. Thank you for joining our group and growing our community. We are now a community of 500 plus, so thank you for growing with us. Please say hello to us in the comment section and let us know that you are here. Also, please use our comment section for questions you may have for our guest speakers. The purpose of our group is to share valuable information in featured weekly segments with professionals in their respective fields around lifestyles, relationships, and entertaining. I'm Rosemary Skinner. I'm a professional event and wedding planner and designer and the owner of Soiree Event Extraordinaire. My host, Crystal Cotto Sullivan, a connector and coach counselor. Cynthia Cross Ballard, the owner of CB Marketing and also Reiki Master. John Sullivan, owner of John Sullivan Counseling. Today's show is all about chocolate and wine pairings. We are pleased to welcome our guest speakers today from Ottawa, um, Joanne Mutter, the owner of JoJo Cocoa, and wine sommelier Robert White. Joanne will share her expertise in chocolate lines with us today, and Robert will pair wine with the chocolates. The host will follow along with chocolates that they ordered ahead from Joanne's store. So I'd like to welcome Joanne and Robert. We are so excited to learn about the chocolates today and how to pair them with wines. So I'm going to proceed. I'm going to just go over to read you their bios, and then we're going to turn it over to our guest speakers for an exciting hour of chocolates and wine. So Joanne is originally from Montreal. Her family moved to Ottawa in mid-high school years. She met her husband in high school at the age of 16, and they have been married for 36 years. They have two grown children, a daughter-in-law, and a granddaughter who all live in Ottawa, and so they feel very fortunate. She went to the University of Ottawa and studied communications. During university, she worked part-time at the Bay, and this is where her career in retail started. After finishing university, she continued to work at the Bay until she had their first child. After maternity leave, she went to work for Club Botico, starting as a store manager and ending her time there as a regional manager for Central and Eastern Canada. She had her second child, decided the time of constant travel was over, so she left Club Monaco and went into a store manager role 6 months later and stayed for 5 years, and then moved into service office central planning team at IKEA as a manager for that group. She developed a new organization that was solely focused on store rebuilds and planning new stores. After 3 years there and working away from home for the most part, she realized it didn't that if she didn't open her own store soon, it would never happen. It was always her goal. As a lifelong fan of chocolate, she started out thinking she would make chocolate and have a shop. She took on an online chocolatier course at a École Chocolat and realized during the course that making chocolate wasn't the route for her. But that didn't mean that she couldn't still have a chocolate store. She spent 6 months researching and writing a business plan and could see the world of chocolate was changing. Craft chocolate makers were challenging the mass production of chocolate and were creating small batch chocolate that focused on the flavor of the cocoa bean. This was so exciting, and so she jumped right in. She has been in business since March of 2012. Her store has evolved over the years, and they have not only offered some of the best chocolate in the world for their customers, they also create a series of chocolate pairing events for further enjoyment of this beautifully made chocolate and wine was the first beautifully made chocolate. Chocolate and wine was the first pairing event that they added, and then they added chocolate and beer, chocolate and tea, chocolate and scotch, and then chocolate and cheese. The most recent pairing is a chocolate, cheese, and wine event. They look forward to many more years of fine chocolate and exciting chocolate pairings. So that's Joanne, and I'm just going to read Robert's because they're going to be working together during the presentation. So Robert White is an independent sommelier and whiskey ambassador located in Ottawa. He's passionate about wines and has incorporated wine appreciation into many of his worldwide travels, including visits to Tuscany, Bordeaux, Germany, Napa, Sonoma Valleys, and even those smaller wineries in the Ottawa Valley. Following graduation from the Algonquin College Sommelier program 15 years ago, he turned his attention from just wine appreciation to wine education. He joined the National Capital Sommelier Guild and was active on the board of directors. For 10 years, he planned, organized, and led tasting events for the members of this club for wine lovers. Robert has remained a member of the Guild and was a recipient of the Guild's Century Award, recognizing the tastings and appreciation of 100 different and unique grape varietals. 5 years ago, he partnered with Joanne of JoJo Cocoa and has enjoyed introducing and educating people about the pleasure of the great and unique combination of wine and chocolate. He hopes that you enjoy this experience today as much as he enjoys sharing it with you. So welcome, Joanne and Robert. We are so excited to get started. So we're going to turn it over to you.
Hi there. Thank you for having us. My name is Joanne, and I'm the owner of JoJo Cocoa Chocolate. And today we're going to have the pleasure of tasting chocolate and learning there's a difference between tasting chocolate and just eating it. And then we're also going to pair some chocolate and wine together. So that's what we have in store for you this afternoon. I think Rosemary gave a great intro, so I won't give you any more details of myself, but we will talk a little bit about the store. I'll just hand it over to Robert for a minute so he can show his face and introduce himself to you.
Hi, I'm Robert. I hope you are enjoying yourselves today, and I look forward to coming to you from snowy Ottawa. Yes, I did say snowy Ottawa. We have snow on the ground, and we got 7 centimeters this morning. Luckily, it's stopped right now. We hope it will melt and go away, but this may be with us till March. You never know. In any case, we will be going through this as Joanne starts. She'll tell you a little bit about what we're going to be doing today. We do have four different wines and 4 different chocolates. I'll introduce the wines first and tell you a little bit about the wines and as well as how to taste wines. And Joanne will tell you the chocolate and the why we've matched the various chocolates to the wines that we have in front of us today. I know that many of you won't have wines in front of you. However, just pretend that you do and recognize that you can get all these wines at the LCBO and you can buy the chocolates from Joanne and you can have your own tasting in the future with exactly what we're telling you today.
Okay, so I guess it's back to me. I just want to introduce the chocolate a little bit for the people who are not familiar with what we call bean to bar chocolate, because that is what we're going to be pairing the wine with. There is a difference between mass-produced chocolate and artisan chocolate, and it's termed bean to bar simply because the chocolate makers actually start the process of making chocolate by buying beans. I don't know, I'm just going to give you a little quick history on how chocolate comes to be, because when I ask people where chocolate comes from, a lot of people are like, Belgium? I'm like, yeah, no, they don't grow any cocoa trees in Belgium. So it actually comes from 20 degrees north or south of the equator are the countries that are able to grow chocolate, and that's because they have the right terroir, the right weather, the year-round ability to grow this great fruit. And yes, cocoa is a fruit. It grows on trees. These are cocoa pod. This is a cocoa pod, and it hangs from the tree. And inside, it's filled with cocoa beans. And cocoa beans is what you want to have removed from the pod in order to make chocolate. So I don't know that you're going to be able to see these beans very well, but these are the little wee beans that you get in your. That you get in the pod. And what the chocolate maker has to do is they have to remove the husk from the outside of this and get rid of it, kind of like, you know, a sunflower seed where you get the seed in the inside. We have the cocoa nibs. There are these little wee bits, of chocolate. And then this is taken and made into the chocolate that we're talking about. And what the intention of these chocolate makers is to respect the flavor that is natural in the cocoa bean and use it to make unique bars without adding any other ingredients. So the bars that we're going to pair with and that pretty much fill my store are simply cacao from various countries mixed with cane sugar, and that's it. So any people who are concerned with being gluten-free, soy-free, nut-free, dairy-free, if you buy a nice dark bar that's made by made with a single origin chocolate, all your bases are covered. So I will, that's briefly what it's about. There is a way of tasting chocolate versus eating it, but I'll do that when we introduce the first pairing, and I'll let Robert start with the wine.
So I'm sitting back from the screen so that you can see this a little bit better. And what we're going to start with today is the 5 S's of wine tasting. Now, these 5 S's that we're going to go through, you can use this anytime that you come into contact with a new wine to evaluate it a little bit better in terms of what you're getting. So the first thing, the first S is the sight. So you look at it, you hold it up to the light, for example, you look at it through the light, you can see it, or a white surface, you can see that it's a dark red in color, looks clear, no sediment in it. So that would be your first S. The second S is to swirl. You swirl the wine gently in the glass. That actually, what happens, it starts the aromatics coming up the inside of the glass so that you can do the next S, which is smell. So if you smell this wine, and the one we're talking about now is the first wine that we're going to be having is a Shiraz. It's the Dandelion Shiraz. Dandelion Shiraz. I do have one bottle here, so Joanne's got one too. If you hold it up, the Dandelion Shiraz is from Australia. If you look at the bottom of it, you will be looking for Lionheart Barossa at the bottom, because Barossa is an area that we prefer to provide. There is sometimes they have Lionheart of McLaren Vale, but Barossa is what we want to use. So as you swirl and smell this, you'll get various aromas. You'll get blackberries, you'll get plums, and you get some black pepper flavors that are in here too. Nice spicy bar. Compared to other Australian wines, this one here is not just a fruit bomb, but it is a wine that basically is put together a lot better, and it gives a lot more flavors, but without being just fruits altogether. There's lots of spices. So the next S, so we've gone through sight, we've gone through swirl, we've gone through, the next one is to sip, and the last S will be to savor. And you should be able to appreciate those nice blueberry and plum flavors that are on it with a long finish on the wine. It's very, very little tannins in this wine. We tend to prefer wines that are not very tannic so that they don't make your mouth feel like it's dried up and the mouth puckering, because you're going to be tasting the chocolate and you don't want your mouth puckering when you're tasting chocolate. I'll turn it over to Joanne and she'll tell you about the chocolate pairing that we have for this wine.
Yeah, so one thing that I did learn from Robert when we were doing, well, I learned many things from Robert, but one thing that I did learn is that after the initial sip, it's interesting to have yet another. It just fills your mouth a little bit more with the flavors so that the flavors become easier to identify, and it sits in your mouth for a little bit longer. So as Robert said, we then have paired this wine with a chocolate that actually has some fruity notes as well, but also is counters some of that fruitiness and adds in some other flavor elements. So the chocolate that we are using to pair with this is Soma chocolate. I hope that's visible enough. It's Bachelor Hall. Whoops. And Bachelor Hall is an area in Jamaica where these beans come from. So this is a very specific one plantation and thus single origin bar. It's 70%. Most of the bars we'll have today are 70%. And contrary to what many people think, the cocoa content does not indicate what the flavor is. It's where the bean comes from that will indicate the flavor of your bar. So every 70% bar does not taste the same. What we have is the Bachelor Hall. As I said, Soma is a renowned chocolate maker in Toronto, one of the first bean-to-bar chocolate makers in the world and in North America for sure. Husband and wife team. They've actually visited this plantation. They know the farmer. They deal directly with the farmer. And so the farmer actually maximizes the profits from his beans by having that relationship with them. So it's a nice dark bar. So this is the piece. Sorry, it's maybe not be so visible. There we go. When you're tasting chocolate, there's a couple of different steps that you go through, like similar to wine, which is also why they work so well together. The first step is to look at the chocolate. I know that might sound a little strange at first, but you're going to look for a nice shine or a matte. You're going to look for making sure there's no pinholes. That just shows a little bit of the quality of the maker, that they take their time and they make sure all the air comes out when they're aerating their bars. You're going to look for color, because color is actually indicative of the bean. Madagascar beans, as for instance, are very, very red in their color, so that it would not look at anything like this piece. The next thing that you do is you break it. So you listen for a nice snap. That will tell you that the bar is still fresh, and that it's, you know, it hasn't been sitting in bad storage. And the other thing to look for, in color as well, is if there's any sort of white or gray to the bar, that could indicate that it's been stored incorrectly. The next thing you do is you smell as well. And oftentimes when I ask people, so what do you smell? They say, chocolate. And I'm like, of course you can smell chocolate. That's a great thing. But is there anything else that you can smell? And this is where we introduce the flavor map to help people identify what it is that they're smelling. So the smaller squares or circle will tell you, is it fruity? Is it spicy? And then from there, you can kind of narrow it down a little bit. For this bar, you put it in your mouth. That's the last thing that you do. But we're tasting, so we're not chewing. We're letting the bar start to melt. I wish you guys were having some of this. And as it melts, the flavors release. So the first bit of flavor that you get from this bar is cherry, which works beautifully with the wine. And then it moves a little bit more to an earthier note, which is also great with the Shiraz, because unlike this one, some Shirazes can be a little bit overly fruity, and this kind of works well with it. It's got a nice long finish. Then you chew it a little bit. And, pardon me, keep the chocolate on your tongue, because your taste buds are not in your teeth, they're on your tongue. So you want to make sure you get the full flavor of that chocolate. And then once we've had the chocolate and we've determined what the flavors are like, we go back to the wine, because what we want to see is how does having the chocolate in our mouth now impact the taste of the wine. So I'll give it back to Robert.
Okay, so now that you've got the chocolate in your mouth, next thing we want to do basically is just very, very gently taste the wine, and let the wine basically linger a little bit on your tongue. And if you can do it without choking, you can try to bring in a little bit of air too, to help aerate the wine a little bit more. And you should see how it matches very well between the chocolate and the wine.
So when we talk about pairings as well, we also talk about complementary pairings or contrasting pairings. This one would be very complementary. Both the wine and the chocolate have very similar flavor notes, with the fruitiness being in there. One does not overpower the other. So it is a complementary pairing. And it's actually one of the ones that our customers really enjoy when we do our chocolate and wine events. Do we have any questions yet, or anything that we can answer before we move to the next one?
That was
No?
very tasty.
Are you
Absolutely
jealous?
delicious.
Very good.
Okay.
I might point out for that wine that these wines that we're having, 3 of the 4 today, are from the Vintages Essentials portion of the LCBO. Vintages Essentials is wines that are available in most stores all the time. You could check with your store though to make sure that it has it. So for example, this one's from Australia. So you would go into the Vintages store to the Australia section, and you would probably find Dandelion vineyards in that area. The next one we're going to be doing, and the next one actually, are 2 other wines from other countries. They will be in that area of the store. The last one is port. Port is not in the vintages section. Port is in the regular section of the store with fortified wines.
Okay, should we move to the next one then, Robert?
Sure.
And we always do suggest that you have a little bit of water in between your pairings just to kind of cleanse your palate a little bit. And I find I need it after the chocolate, especially. The chocolate stays a little bit longer in your mouth. All right. We're good to go, Robert.
The next wine. Once again, we'll still go through the 5 S's of wine tasting, which is sight. Again, looking at that nice, bright, dark red color. Swirl it to get the aromatics moving. Smell. And then we'll sip and savor.
So different from the last wine.
This one has raspberries, just right, lots and lots of raspberry to start with. And then you have black cherry and black pepper also. So it's a different type of fruit, a different type of flavor profile, which is what you want with wines. So this is Baronia Reserva. Baronia Reserva is from Spain. Actually, maybe Joanne got the bottle. I don't have one in front of me, but if you like,
I just symbol at angling. There we go.
Is everyone able to see that Baronia Reserva? Make sure you're looking at the Reserva at the bottom in the blue portion of the tag, because the Reserva it's important to look for in the vintages section, because they do have a Baronia in the store, and the Baronia is not as good as the Reserva. Once again, the Reserva is in the vintages section of the store. And by the way, that's great, Joanne. When you're talking about the vintages section of the store, it doesn't mean that the wines are expensive in the vintages section. It just means that they don't have enough wine basically to put in all 8,000 locations in Ontario. So they put those wines in a smaller selection of stores, and that is the vintages section of stores. So it's not expensive. It's got to do with the amount of quantity that they can get. So after we've tasted that, Joanne now will tell you about the chocolate that we're going to match with this one.
Okay, so actually after Robert introduced me to this wine, it has become one of my household wines. I love this wine. There's also to me a smokiness element to it, which I really enjoy, combined with that fruitiness. And so I chose, and then we agreed that the best bar to pair this with is a bar where the chocolate comes from Guatemala, and it comes from a very specific plantation in Guatemala, where they're still doing everything very old school, and they have harvested cacao there for hundreds of years. So the trees are very old, and they produce very fine quality beans. They're actually a cross between the Criollo, which is a very fine flavor bean, and the Trinitario, which is grown for a little bit more of its hardiness. So this bar, being from Guatemala, it's a 73% dark bar. Going through a little bit with the tasting, again, this is a different piece, but one of the things that I notice about these bars that Cyrene makes, he's a chocolate maker in Victoria, BC, an award-winning chocolate maker as well, who actually found his way to chocolate as he was a photographer for National Geographic. It's interesting because nobody really starts out to be a chocolate maker. Many of them have careers beforehand, and they fall into chocolate somehow. And of course, then they fall in love with chocolate, and then they move on and become chocolate makers. But the one thing I like about Cyrene's bars is that they're quite thick, but the melt is beautiful. So they melt similarly to a thinner bar in that, I mean, you get the flavors really quickly in your mouth, but it lasts longer because the piece is just thicker. So this one is a thicker bar. It's about as dark, but not as shiny as the last one that we had. I don't know if you heard that, but it's got an interesting snap. Sometimes the thicker bars are a little bit more difficult to break, but this one seems to do well. The aroma has a little bit of floral to it. It's not as chocolatey smelling as the first one. Very nice. As I said, as soon as it goes in your mouth, it starts to melt. And the floral aroma that we first got actually is not in the flavor as much as some fruitiness is. But it's kind of a low-key kind of chocolate where you do get some of the roasted notes, which is the first process in chocolate making. When the chocolate makers get their beans, the first thing they do is roast them, and that determines how the flavor is going to evolve from that bean. So this one, it gets a little bit stronger as it goes, and there's a little bit of tartness coming out from it, which I think makes it strong enough to stand up to this wine, this very flavorful wine. They're really good together. And to have them both in your mouth, which is also an interesting way to do it. A very interesting flavor profile comes out. Robert, anything to add?
Yeah, the Tempranillo, the Baronia is made with Tempranillo from Spain. It's also, this was one of Joanne's favorite wines at one time until we get to the next one, which became her more favorite wine. Well, as we've got these wines and we've introduced other ones, they always become a new favorite of Joanne's, okay? She hasn't been exposed to all of these before. However, this wine here, it's the end of barbecue season, but this goes wonderfully with ribs on the barbecue. It would be a perfect match for it also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's where, so the interesting thing about trying to pair chocolate with wine, or pair it with anything for that matter, but when we first started doing the pairings, I kind of took my cue from foods that the chocolate or that the wine would pair nicely with. So when you think about this wine going well with kind of a spicier meal, like a barbecued meal, that's where this Guatemalan chocolate kind of comes in, because there is that intense flavor in this chocolate that I think works really nicely with the wine because of the intensity. I have to have one more piece, sorry. And Robert, do you think there's any impact after? Does the wine change for you?
Oh yeah, I love the combination.
It's just really smooth and really interesting. Again, it's more of a complementary pairing than anything in contrast. So
we found in general, we found the complementary pairings seem to go a little bit better when you've got matching flavors both in the chocolate and in the wine. Contrast is a little bit harder because sometimes you think maybe it doesn't work. But not every wine, by the way, works with every chocolate, because the ones that we're talking about today, that we have actually evaluated these against probably 3 or 4 or 5 different chocolates to find the one that goes best with the wine. When you go through sommelier programs, they always say that chocolate doesn't match with wine because the rule of thumb is the wine should always be sweeter than the dessert. However, Joanne and I met with a winemaker in Ottawa not that long ago, who was in the same thing, saying wine and chocolate don't match. At the end of our little session with him, he had been converted. He said wine and chocolate does match. So anyone who tells you it doesn't match, they're wrong. Okay.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about that experience was we changed our process in that we, instead of having 5 different wines with 5 different chocolates, we were using one wine. And we actually found it interesting that we could contrast that wine and bring different flavors of the wine out based on the type of chocolate that we used. So we used a plain dark, we used a spicy, like something that had a little bit of a Mayan spice in it, and we actually used a fruity chocolate. And between, like, they all worked nicely with the bar or with the wine, but they all brought out different elements of the wine. And I think that was the conversion of the winemaker in realizing that, yeah, you could actually highlight different parts of the wine based on the chocolate. So, okay.
Joanne, I have a question before you go on.
Sure.
Because my wife, Crystal, talked to you, and what she explained to me, when I would like you to explain more, is that the beans take on the flavor of the earth where they're grown, much like wine grapes and olives. Is that, can you speak to that a bit?
Yeah, so cacao trees are smaller and they are shade trees. So often they are planted closer to other items that are growing in that particular area. So, for instance, in Madagascar, the gentleman who does a lot of the Madagascar beans, he also has a variety of peppers growing on his farm. And what you do get are some of that sharpness from the pepper ends up in the cocoa bean. So it does start with the terroir for sure. It also is influenced by what's growing around it. And then of course, it also depends once it comes out of the pot and it gets roasted, what the chocolate maker does to it can alter the flavor. But if you take just raw beans, and this is what the chocolate makers do, they get these, the beans that are just sun-dried sent to them, they crack them open, and they open them up and they're like, oh yeah, that's Madagascar. Because there are some familiarities depending on what country these beans are grown in. And yes, and just the element of the fact that the beans need to have shade, so they are grown best when they're surrounded by something else.
Thank you.
No problem.
If I could follow up a little bit in that, and the question John asked, remember, we've got to remember that both grapes and chocolate are agricultural products.
Mm-hmm.
So they, depending on what the conditions are each year, they will be a little bit different. Whether you've got lots of sun, whether you've got rain, whether you've got high temperatures, low temperatures, whether you have frost, which affects bud break. There's a whole variety of things. So it's an agricultural product which will change from year to year. So as you were talking about the beans taking up the flavors of the soil, grapes do the same thing, depending on where they're grown and what type of soil that they have to access, as well as how much water there is, how much sunlight they have, etc.
And it's interesting to go there too, because Robert, you and I have talked about what some pairings that have worked really well for a long time, and then we do it again and it's like, that's not the same thing. And it's either the wine year is different and maybe the grapes didn't have a great year, or it's a different batch of chocolate. So I don't know, again, if I can get this close enough for you to see, but is it too shiny to see? On the back of this bar, you'll see this little square that says batch number. So this is batch number 45. The next shipment that I get from this, if it's a different batch of beans that the chocolate maker has received since making this round of bars, it might taste a little different. For many of us, we can't detect that. You have to kind of really know the bar. But that's how we find our favorites as well. And then, yeah. No, and then I was going to say, and then sometimes our favorites change because maybe the bar gets too fruity for what you want it to be. And so then you move on to another flavor. If you know the flavor profile that you like, then it's really interesting to travel through the different chocolate makers and find out how they get that flavor in their bar.
This is probably a silly question, but with grapes, there are so many different varieties of grapes, and there's so many different varieties of olives. I mean, any agricultural product there is. How many varieties of cocoa bean are there?
Okay, so that that's an ongoing question in the cocoa world. So when I first started down this journey, there were basically 5 defined types of beans. There was the Fosterio, which is the bulk chocolate that really doesn't have a lot of fine flavor to it, but it has its chocolatey notes. And it's the most hardy bean to grow. And so the larger companies that need lots and lots of beans, they buy these beans, and they have these plantations in order to be able to get a massive amount of beans and then be able to export those beans and make a massive amount of mass-produced chocolate, essentially. However, in recent years, there have been strains of this bean that have been discovered that actually do have some fine flavors to them. So now they're being identified under 2 names. The, I want to say Amelino, sorry, not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, Fosterio. So there would be 2 names attached now to what used to be only 1. And that is just the beginning of everybody kind of spreading out and looking at all of these beans a little bit differently. The next grade of beans that you have is called the Trinitario, and it's the most commonly used bean for chocolate makers because it's a great compromise between the Criollo, which is a fine flavor bean, which will be the next one I talk about, and the Fosterio. It's a hybrid of those two. So it grows well, but it has some fine flavors to it. So you can identify the flavors. And now, of course, there are different versions of Trinitario because depending on which Criollo bean was used from which country, it will influence the hybrid combination of flavors. Then the next level up is the Criollo. And the Criollo is the most commonly used fine flavor bean. And just to clarify, it's not that common. It's expensive. It's hard to grow. It doesn't yield a big harvest. And the farmers are a little leery of using this bean simply because it is hard to grow and they just don't know what their crop is going to look like. So there are Criollo beans in countries like Madagascar. There are Criollo beans in Peru and Brazil. Those are countries that are, renowned for having grown cacao for many years. And then there was the Nacional. And the Nacional was a bean that was grown originally in Peru, way up in the mountains. So not easy to access, not easy to grow, but oh my God, the flavors are so fantastic. So then in the chocolate world, it was like, okay, it's gone. It's extinct. Like we can't find any more of these beans. We can't find any more of these trees. It's done. And then they discovered that there was another bean in Peru that had exactly the same genetics as this one that was originally the Nacional in Ecuador. So now we have the Peruvian Nacional, which is a similar in flavor. And when the chocolate makers knew about this, it was a party. Like everybody was dancing. It was like, oh my God, we can get these beans again, but not everybody can get them. So they were kind of divvied up, and that bean is still out there, and we are still able to get it. It's just not as easy to purchase, and it's much more expensive for the chocolate makers. And then we have beans like Porcelana. Porcelana is another highly regarded bean. But when a bar is made with the Porcelana bean, it raises the price significantly. So I'll just say on average, my bars are anywhere from $10 to $12 for anywhere around 60 gram bar. A 60 gram bar from a Porcelana bean is $22. So there's a great deal of difference in the pricing based on availability or lack thereof, and based on fine flavor. And now the last thing that I read was, okay, so how far do we go in identifying these beans, because we don't know that the consumer knows what these beans are. So would it make a difference to you if we put the bean type and further defined it that when it is one of these 5 beans? So that's kind of the debate, but it is an ongoing discovery that there are these different branches, if you will, of one particular bean that is actually producing some different flavors. So
Great, thank you. Very interesting. Thanks.
yeah, no problem. Okay. Anything else, or can we go to the next one?
Oh, go to the next one. Yes, please.
Okay. All right. Robert, you want to go ahead with the wine?
Okay. Just before we do this, I usually give a hint to our audience about something that they may want to think of. Today, I'm going to talk about 2017. In general, 2017 was not a very good year for winemakers anywhere in the world. There are some exceptions, obviously, to the rule, but if you are at a store and you have a choice between the 2017 and some other year, I would suggest you pick the other year and come back to it when the 2017 is no longer available and the 2018 is out. Okay, just a small hint. And it's just not myself, but a person called Tim Atkins, who I follow, who's a master of wine, actually came out with the same general comments that 2017 was pretty bad, basically worldwide for winemakers, just because of weather conditions, bud break, lots of rain, fires in Australia, such things. So the next wine we're going to be tasting is a Chianti Classico from Popoli. The Chianti Classico, and Joanne's got the bottle up. Maybe just make sure that everyone can see it. This is one of one of her favorites now. By the way, the Sangiovese grape, which is what Chianti is made with, is my favorite grape in the world. I enjoy Sangioveses more than any other grape. So if we do, once again, we do the sight, we do the swirl, smell, sip, and savor. This is just a wonderful, wonderful wine. I love Sangiovese. So what you are going to get, some people may pick up a little bit of floral on the nose. Those are violet notes. I had to look it up because I'm not really good on flowers. I pick up flowers, but I don't know what type of flowers smell like which. Okay, so it's not the end of the world if you don't know all your flowers. But what you will get here, you will get cherry and currant flavors. You get some slight smoky notes, and this is all typical of Sangiovese. Sangiovese is found generally in 3 groups from Tuscany in Europe: the Vino Nobile di Montepulciano, the Chianti Classico, and the Brunello di Montalcino. Brunello di Montalcino is my favorite, but at about $65 a bottle, it is a special occasion wine. It's not what I usually drink. However, once again, just take a sip of this wine and see what it's like, and then I'll pass it over to Joanne again, and we'll talk about the chocolate. Love Sangioveses. By the way, it goes great with all Italian foods.
So the chocolate that we've paired with this one is the bean is from Papua New Guinea. The chocolate maker is Sweetness. Sweetness is based in Windsor, Ontario. And the woman who makes these bars, Michelle, her background is more in pastry and dessert cooking or baking. And she brings a lot of fun to her bars. She makes a lot of flavorful bars, but she also does single origin bars. The Papua New Guinea bean, it's an interesting country because most countries dry their beans in the sun. So once they've gone through all the other processes, and this is the last step that the farmer takes, they just lay them out in these big beds or lay them on top of banana leaves, and they let them dry. In Papua New Guinea, many of the chocolate growers, the cacao farmers, actually smoke dry their beans. So they're drying them over a wood fire, basically. So when those beans are done, they often have intensely smoky notes to them, which, if you like a peaty Scotch, you might like a smoky Papua New Guinea bar. It's got that intensity of flavor. This bar, however, there's a new co-op happening in Papua New Guinea where farmers are handing over their beans before that last step. And the co-op is actually doing the drying, and they're doing it in a more typical fashion. So you get less of the smoky notes to it. The smoky notes are not natural to this bean. What's natural in this bean from a flavor perspective, again, is some fruity notes and some rum notes and some kind of woody notes to it, but not a smoked wood. So this is the chocolate. So again, everybody's got their own take on what they should do with their bar. So what Michelle does is she uses a kind of typical in the chocolate world mold. So she doesn't have a mold created for herself like many of the other chocolate makers, strive to achieve. But she does do this nice little splattering of cocoa butter on the top of the bar. So it makes it kind of a fun and interesting bar to look at. The snap is always great. So there's a nice clean snap. And the aroma here that is quite strong is the chocolate aroma. You're not getting a lot of interference from any fruits or any of the other things that I previously mentioned. You're getting a lot of fudgy chocolate. So when you taste this bar, the melt is really nice. In fact, I asked Michelle when I first tried these bars, I said, Michelle, are you adding like a lot more cocoa butter? because chocolate makers will add a little extra cocoa butter sometimes just to smooth things out or to make it more melty. And she's like, no, I'm not adding any more cocoa butter. So it's part of her process in the 7 steps of making chocolate that she spends more time in order to keep the flavor of the bar, but increase its meltability. And that's a fine line. Because if you do it for too long, you can lose the flavor of the chocolate and all you get is this nice melty chocolate. Anyway, this one is described, I think I just got a little bit of like a licorice taste in there. But so this bar is smooth, it's creamy, it's fruity, but on the back end, it's got a little bit of a roasted, but not too much note to it. And when you combine it with the wine, some of the other elements raise to the surface. I don't get as much of the fruit in this one after I have the chocolate. Robert, anything to add?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. I love this wine. I would highly recommend any of these wines, by the way.
Joanne, do you have the bottle to show that one? Did we see that bottle?
Yep.
The
Hang on.
folio. Okay, I think I marked that down.
Got
Okay.
it?
Yes, thank you.
And this one is the 2018. The Baronia that we had was the 2015.
Okay. Verona was 2015.
Yeah, that's the Reserva that's there right now. And the Dandelion was also 2018.
Okay.
You notice we're staying away from the 2017s on this tasting today.
Yep. Trying to be smart.
Do we want to go on to the next one?
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
Sure.
Go ahead,
Okay,
Rob.
so the next one is a port. This is a late bottled vintage port from Taylor Fladgate. Port is a fortified wine. When we do our tastings, a lot of people have not had port before, and sometimes they're very, very surprised at how good it is. Other people, there's only a few people that most basically say they don't like it. So port, how they make port, I think is an interesting thing, so that I can tell you a little bit about it. This is a sweet wine. It's made to be sweet. It will be sweet with your chocolate, and it is the perfect accompaniment to chocolate also. Port is made by taking the wines, and in Taylor Fladgate, they actually tread them by feet in large concrete tubs. So they put them in there, and like that old Lucy show where they actually go through there and do them by foot, they still do it at Taylor Fladgate. After the wine the juice is pressed off and it goes under skin contact, it's then kept in barrel. Okay, so fermentation, as you know, is sugars being converted to carbon dioxide and ethanol. Before all the sugars are converted to carbon dioxide and ethanol, they stop the fermentation process with the addition of 20% brandy. So when they add brandy to it, it stops the fermentation, leaves some sweetness in it, but it increases the alcohol content to about 20% for this wine. So that's why it's called a fortified wine. But I would like you to taste it. You're going to find some beautiful flavors in here. And as I said, this is what you want definitely with your chocolate. This is the best accompaniment probably. So even though it's sweet, it's not sweety, super sweet that it actually stays on your palate and say, that's not nice, because it's got a lot of acidity in it. It's got plum, it's got some smoky notes, and it's got a very, very great acidity, and it's got a chocolatey finish on its own. So even before you get to the chocolate, you're already tasting some chocolate notes. So this is Taylor Fladgate's late bottled vintage port. I don't have the bottle right in front of me because you can keep port for about 2 months basically before it actually will go flat on you, if you want to say. Red wine's usually 3 days. I poured a glass of this morning and I put the rest of it in my cupboard because I'm going to have probably a glass tonight. The 2015, and you can find it at the LCBO in the fortified section.
Yeah, so this is usually how we finish our tasting because it is the sweetest wine and it is the fortified wine. It's a new experience, as Robert said, for a lot of people. It's the perfect pairing for chocolate. We have done the same pairing with this port since we began these events because we found what we believe to be the perfect pairing. This is hummingbird chocolate. And for those of you who might be familiar with Hummingbird, they are located here. Erica and Drew, who are the owners, they live in Stittsville, and they have their chocolate factory in Almont. They have grown exponentially in the past couple of years because in the year 2016, they won the Golden Bean Award from the Academy of Chocolate. So if you're not familiar with the Academy of Chocolate, it's a real thing. There are two international competitions for chocolate. One is the Academy of Chocolate based in London in the UK, and the other one is the International Chocolate Association, which has grouped countries together, and then you kind of build up and go to the finales. When they won that award, it just skyrocketed them, and people are have tried this bar and love this bar on its own. The lovely thing about this, it's a Hispaniola, which is a Dominican Republic bean. So, and it has flavor notes of cherry and raisin. It's perfect for the flavor notes that are in the port. So it's also a very complementary pairing. And actually, I think people who shy away from port, when they have it combined with the chocolate, which is right here, they find that they quite enjoy the port when it is paired with the chocolate. So it's definitely something that, you know, you're going to have at the end of the evening, likely, which makes it a really nice pairing with the chocolate. Just finishes off a meal really nicely. The melt is a little slow. The flavors develop. And then suddenly they're all there. And it's just kind of this kind of fruity explosion that works so beautifully with the port.
And then you can take the port and take another sip of it right now and see how it tastes.
Mm-hmm. So that would conclude our chocolate and wine pairings. We always end with the port or a sweeter wine, just to give people some variety. So we suggest if you're going to do your own chocolate and wine pairing that you kind of follow that same order, and you'll enjoy yourself immensely.
Thank you so much. That was so interesting. We had some really nice comments and that joint because we've got about 6 minutes left, but I know you have a beautiful gift box. Can you share that with the viewers and how they can get the chocolate? Can they, like the chocolates you picked today, could that be done like the exact ones in the gift box? And just to show that beautiful gift box and what comes with it. Oh, in the alert again.
So we got the taster's box, the tasting box, and
Sorry.
Getting some feedback there, Joanne.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the tasting box, which is a great sampling of wines that we've been able to taste. So, Joanne, I think this is Rosemary's question.
Yep. I think we're gonna freeze on the screen.
Would we put? Can you do a wine tasting box? Yes. Look at this is just a great box. I love this box.
So this box actually grew out of the fact that we do chocolate tasting events fairly regularly, and it's mind blasting for people when they realize that it's not the cocoa content that makes the difference in the flavor of the bar. So what we did was we just took our event and we put it in a box. So you get 4 different bars. They're all the same cocoa content, but they're different chocolate makers. The beans are from different parts of the world, and the idea is to open them all, go through the how-to, use the flavor wheel to help you identify the flavors, and take some notes. There's some ability to take some notes in here. And then you'll start to learn a little bit more about the flavor that comes from the various beans and what the chocolate maker is doing with them. I always talk to people about, it's like you wouldn't walk into the liquor store and ask for a bottle of red wine. But people will come into the store and ask for a 70% bar. And I always kind of, mention to them, well, do you know what country you would like it to come from? And they look at me like, no, I have no idea. So I explain it like wine. If you like a French wine because you like those grapes, if you like a Spanish wine because you like those grapes, if you like an Australian wine because you like those grapes, that's what narrowing down the flavor of these bars comes down to. You eventually find the one that you love. I happen to love the beans from Vietnam and the beans from Belize. They are my two favorite beans, but not all bars are created equal. And so I'm able to experiment with different chocolate makers who use those beans.
That's great. Thanks, Joanne. And that's what happened to me. I walked into her store and was blown away by the chocolate. Of course, had no idea. Asked the same question. We just would like a chocolate bar with coffee. And she said, all right. And she asked questions and we came up with the best chocolate bar. So these are the little cards that are in the box, which are fantastic for the chocolate tasting. Now, Joanne, do you have a wine tasting sample box?
Sorry, yes, we do, but it's a little bit more difficult because we can recommend the wines for people, but hang on, sorry, excuse me.
Sure.
Sorry, the store is open, and even on a snowy day, we have customers. Yeah, so it's a little bit more difficult to do a wine pairing box simply because then we have to ask people to go out and buy $100 worth of wine, because that's essentially what 5 bottles are going to cost you. So what we have been trying to kind of move towards is, here's a wine that we would recommend, and here are 5 bars that you can enjoy with that wine. Right.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah. And then the other thing that we are doing from a gift perspective is we do a chocolate and wine combined basket, and I'll just grab one of those.
Great.
And just so you guys, that Joanne will ship to you, right? Joanne, you'll ship. That's beautiful. Wow.
Yeah. So this is actually, we recommend, because we're a couple of doors down from the LCBO, we recommend our customers to go down and pick up 1 or 2 of the bottles that are on our list, and then bring them back to us, and we will put 1 or 2 bars, whatever you want, into the basket, along with the pairing notes and why we've paired these things together.
Fantastic.
That's wonderful. Okay.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Joanne and is not allowed to sell wines because the LCBO's that's what they do.
That's right. It's Ontario.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
This went by so fast, but we had great comments about how educational it was, and that's really what we wanted to come across. Joanne, I know you can do this. You are doing a big event. What a great idea for a company. Do you want to just quickly tell us about that before we wrap?
Yeah, sure. There's a lot of organizations who still want to, have something for the holidays for their employees, but they're looking at virtual events. So we have been hired by a company here in Ottawa who has over 300 employees, and we are putting together two wines from local wineries, so 1 sparkling white and 1 red, and we've paired chocolates with both of those. We're putting the package together. It's going to be delivered to those 300 people, and then we're going to have an event online where people can enjoy what they received in the mail and talk to Robert and I. We'll talk them through the pairings.
That's awesome. You guys make a great team.
Party.
That is so great idea. And I have a question. Do you ship to the USA?
No, sorry, not yet. So yeah, it's just difficult right now. Everything's difficult right now. You have to figure out a way around things right now. And we didn't actually really start shipping until lockdown. So we've learned a lot. In fact, my husband and I just had a conversation last night about, okay, we got to fix this delivery shipping thing that we got going on, because it's still challenging. Very challenging across Canada to ship at a reasonable rate. So once we get ourselves sorted out here in Canada, we will be looking hopefully to the US. Wonderful. But there are a couple of other good chocolate people out in the US, so you can get your chocolate there.
Well, thank you again to both you. Your level of knowledge is so is very high. Obviously, we've learned a lot from you, and I know there's a lot more we want to learn. And I know we've asked you both to come back. I think Robert will do the whiskey tasting with the chocolate, and I think we're going to add cheese next time. So we're excited to have you back in the new year.
Excellent.
We've run out of time, but I can't. Just wonderful, wonderful, and a great gift idea. So please, Cynthia has listed all the links in our comment section, so you'll be able to reach right directly out to Joanne at JoJo Coco. And that, so for next week, we are going to have back the Windsor Essex Tourism. So it'll be Gordon Orr, Lynette Bain, and Jason Toner to talk to us all about staycations during the holidays and all types of holiday activities you can do right here at home, as well as shopping local. So thank you, everybody. Thank you to my co-hosts, and thank you to our viewers for watching. Please like and share it. We will have a watch party on Thursday night. So if you didn't catch it live today, you'll be able to watch it there or just play it on your own through the site. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day, and get some chocolate and some wine. You can add it to your holiday gathering. Take care, everyone. Have a beautiful day.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.